Hi, this is Dovid Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. And wherever you're listening or watching to your podcasts, I am so happy that you have invited me once again into your life so that we can share this special time together. And interestingly enough, last episode I sang the Rabbi Orlofsky theme show a cappella because I had offered the opportunity to people and nobody seemed to jump at it. But after my attempt, so Avadia Lowy said to me that right at the dinner table, his wife said to him, "You got to do something." Now, I don't know if that's because she just thought my singing was so terrible that we cannot put up with this for another week. But in any event, he has graciously submitted a new a cappella version.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun for every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah, anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com.
Again, he himself says this is a rough cut, so there is still room for other people to submit their attempts. Like I say, I got the impression that he wasn't trying to win any contest with this as much as he just wanted to do that tremendous chesed for Klal Yisrael. So Baruch Hashem for that. We have a sponsorship this week. William Hine. The name is Zev Mordechai ben Chaim Shlomo. This is from Rachel Hine, and she writes, "My brother and I would like to sponsor the shiur right before Parshas Bamidbar." That's this one. It is Mitzvah Hashem, our father's second bar mitzvah. His Hebrew birthday is Kaf Tes Iyar. So happy birthday. Unfortunately, as of now, due to the world situation, we cannot be with my father, nor will shul be open for him to have an aliyah. Also, I guess he does not have to say a speech either, or he could, and we'll be happy to put it up here on the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. We know how much he enjoys your shiurim, and this will be extremely meaningful to him. And so, happy birthday, and I can just hope that it'll be a day full of bracha and all kinds of good things, and we should be able to celebrate the next birthday in a nice fancy restaurant, surrounded with good food, good people, good times, and what can I tell you? I have not traveled to the States. Obviously, I went towards the beginning of the year just to visit family. I have a daughter there, and my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law are there, and my brothers are there. So it was an opportunity to be able to see family. And with each passing day, I think to myself, I can't get alphabet noodles. They don't have them in this country. I'm out of Folgers. I don't have any Folgers coffee. I've been reduced to drinking Maxwell House. How much longer can this go on for? The rest of my family drinks Taster's Choice. They don't know the difference. It's just brown water. What's the point? But that's all right. That's all right. I also would like to see all my relatives, but I can get some American veal. All right, anyway, that's not important. I usually have a trip around this time. It's on Shavuos. We usually make for lunch veal, but now I guess we'll make one of the delicious things we have here in Eretz Yisrael. Yeah, Eretz Yisrael cold cuts. It's a different experience. Yeah. So help me. When we first came here, we bought chicken franks, and twice I found a feather in them. So, what can I tell you? I used to bring back American Frankfurters when I went to America. My kids were like, "Oh, can we have those?" I said, "If you could eat the ones with the feathers, then you don't get these." Anyway, oh Hashem, I have the schus to live in Israel. Israel niknu b'yisur. That's what they mean when there's no Folgers. Anyway, but I digress. Yeah, because what I really want to speak is the fact that I remember it was the Shabbos before Shavuos, and Rabbi Shapiro said that Yerushalmis always refer to this Shabbos as the Shabbos of Kinyanei HaTorah. Now, obviously, as we know, Maseches Avos has 5 prakim. It's interesting. I may have told this story already. I don't remember. But when my son finished Shas the first time, so Moshe Shapiro spoke, and he said, "This is not really Siyam HaShas. This is called Siyam HaMasechtas. In order to do Siyam HaShas, you have to also do all of the Mishnayos that don't have Gemaras on it. So all of the ones in Zroyim and all the ones in Taharis, all the ones that fill in. So interestingly enough, Daf Yomi includes the only Masechta in Moed that doesn't have a Gemara on it, which is Shkolim. I actually do the Yerushalmi. It includes Midos, it includes Edyos, it includes all the ones that are just Keenan. It has all of the ones except for the ones in Zrayim and Taharos and Avos, interestingly enough. So in my morning Daf Yomi, I told the story over, and I said, at the end of each year, we're going to do one Mishnah. So we went through Peah. We're at the end of Demai, and the Me'etz Hashem will get through this, and then we'll have to do Pirkei Avos after we finish Zrayim. Now, I say Pirkei Avos, but Maseches Avos is in fact 5 prakim, and that's why you'll find a lot of the Rishonim do not comment on the 6th parak. The sixth parak of Pirkei Avos is not in Maseches Avos. That's the difference between Maseches Avos and Pirkei Avos. Pirkei Avos includes that 6th parak, and that parak is called the Parekh of Kenyatta. And it is in fact a collection of brises. Brisa means outside, because when they put together the Mishnayos, they took all of the various Tanaic texts that people had from all of their Rebbeim. It wasn't usher to write down the Torah Shabbat, it was usher to publish it. Parenthetically, Rav Moshe Shapiro said once that the Isser, I should say different, that the heter to write down Torah Shabbat Peh was only because of Eis La'asos La'Hashem Heferos Orasecha, only because the Torah would be forgotten. And he said that still applies. The only reason to write a sefer is because you feel you have something that has to be shared with Klal Yisrael. Otherwise, you wouldn't bother writing, because it falls under the issa of writing down the Torah Shabbat Peh. Very interesting. But so they wrote down all the notes from their various Rebbeim, and they brought them all together to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and the Chachonim, and they organized it into the Mishnah. And those that, some of them, they kept them intact. Some of them, they edited them. And some of them, they had to rewrite completely new ones. So the ones that existed, they felt didn't do the job. And so a brisa was all of the leftover Tanaic texts. So they didn't get rid of them. They were set up by Reb Chia, and they were Rabbi Shia. They were set up into a seder. Some of them were put into the Toseftas. Some of them were set up, and other stuff. Some of them were just, loose brises. And went to the big brisa box in the back of the base medrash. And very often in Gemara, what they would do is they would pull out a brisa, and compare it to what the Mishnah says, so that you can use it as for comparative purposes. They published a number of years ago a rough draft of Gvuras Hashem by the Maharal, where he actually edited it. You could see where he was editing it. And they put out a rough draft. Yeah. Moshe Shapiro said on that, Zemashu yoter intimate. Yeah, something more intimate. You get to see the process that went into it. Parenthetically, I've mentioned it more than once. There's this unbelievable translation of the Torah into English called the Living Torah. Art School translates the Torah into a dialect that's similar to English, but the Living Torah by R Kaplan can actually be read. And it is such an unbelievable task. I know this because I'm trying to do the same thing with Mesilas Yesharim. Because it's so hard to take a line in Mesilas Yesharim and make it accessible without totally losing what's there. So the first line of Mesilas Yesharim, which is the foundation of piety and the root of perfect divine service, is to be clear and true what is our obligation in this world and where we should turn our outlook and our longings in all that we struggle for every day of our life. That's not the easiest sentence for people to relate to. The translation that I'm working with is something more along the lines of the first thing you have to do in life is to figure out why you're alive. And that's going to determine every decision that you make, how you plan your life, what you look for, and everything that you do. Now, I've taken something that he said and I reduced it and rewrote it, but it's a line that I think people can relate to a lot more. So it's tricky. It's definitely a tricky thing to do. In any event, R Kaplan wrote the Sefer, which is a translation of the Torah into readable English, and he writes in his introduction, it took him 9 months to write it, and he says that I feel like it's another one of my children. It took 9 months to conceive and to deliver. Yeah. If you ever want to do something fascinating, get the Living Torah and just read through the bibliography. I mean, besides the fact that he has every Jewish source, Nigla Venista, being quoted there. He's got various Greek philosophical works, Roman philosophical works. He's got now it's been publicized a little bit more, but he had it there at the beginning. He was talking about Tchelis, a work called "Dying in Ancient Israel," a unpublished manuscript by Rabbi Herzog. So now the Tchelis people have publicized this, but it was really not very well known when he came out with it. He has the Odyssey, the Iliad. It just fascinating reading through his bibliography how much material went into this. Anyway, some years after he passed away, there was these two students who were doing a paper on this work, and so they came to his wife, his almana, and asked if they could see the rough notes that he had. And he says, "What rough notes? There were no rough notes. He just sat down and wrote the whole thing, just as you see it." Unbelievable accomplishment. Unbelievable. There was you see the Maharal and Gvuras Hashem had a rough copy, So these were the rough notes, and they were left for comparison purposes. Meaning, you could take a brisa and compare it to the Mishnah and try to figure out, this must be Rabbi Meir's shita because in the brisa that's said by Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda argues with the man. You can compare it. The brisa. I gave an introduction once to my Gemara class, and as to the Mishnah, the Brisa, Tanam, or all kinds of different things. At the end, I gave a test. And I remember I asked, what's a Brisa? And one guy wrote, the little Mishnah that couldn't. I, of course, gave him credit. I mean, what a great answer. Later on in the year, we were doing Gittin, actually. Later on in the year, there's a whole discussion in the Gemara which Rechem we're talking about. It says if you bring a get from Rechem. So it says, is it this Rechem? It says that Rechem. And there's a whole machlekes where Rechem is. So I asked on the test later on in the year, I said, where's Rechem? And the same boy, he wrote, where isn't it? I had to give him credit for that too. But so there's a collection of prices. Interestingly enough, the entire Mesilas Yesharim bases himself on a brisa by Reb Pinchas ben Yair. Didn't make it into the Mishnah. So the sixth Parekh of Pirkei Avos is a collection of brises. These are not in the Mishnah, and they were organized into Parekh. And the concept about it, all the brises that were put together, is the greatness of learning Torah. Now, among it is, of course, the brisa of the Memches Dvarim Torah Niknis Behen, the 48 things that you need in order to acquire Torah. And they are the Kinyanei Torah, and it could be it's from there that the name of the Shabbos Kinyanei Torah comes from. And it's a very interesting idea, right? When you go through these things, and I used to give a shiur on each one of these midos. Now, I take, I had the schus to be in a shiur with Rav Moshe Shapiro in Pirkei Avos, and I came in the sixth parak, and he was doing that brisa, and it was an amazing thing. And I'm taking issue slightly with the 48 Ways to Wisdom series based on Rav Noach Weinberg. I had the tapes when there were tapes. Yeah, I remember listening to them. And on each tape, they gave a little introduction, the same introduction. He says, the 48 Ways to Wisdom are just good techniques for you to be able to acquire wisdom. You want to be a better mathematician, study the 48 Ways. You want to be a better student, 48 Ways. You want to be more successful, these 48 Ways to Wisdom will help you be more successful. It's not true. That underlying principle is not true. You don't need these things to be successful in life. There was a book about a mathematician who was called A Beautiful Mind. And this guy was, I think he suffered from schizophrenia. He was a very successful mathematician. He won the Nobel Prize. Was he besimcha? Stammer not. Yeah. If you want to become great in English literature, I would argue that Tahara will be a disadvantage. My wife was in a literature class in Queens College. They wanted to read a particular book, and she made it very clear that she refused, because you may call this a classic, but I call this pornography, and I refused to read it. And so she was excused from the book. But if you want to be successful in English literature, Tahara is going to help you. You want to be successful, as a pre-med student, it's very highly competitive. No seba'om chavero, helping your friend, is not necessarily going to get you there. In general, it's an amazing thing how education has become so competitive. Stephen Covey in The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People say, one of the big things we do in business is we try to get people to work together, synergize, have everybody work together as a team. He says, if you do that in school, they call it cheating. Now, we discourage you from working together as a team. And then suddenly you go into business where your entire education is based on doing this by myself. Now you want me to do this as a team? Very hard concept. So it's not essential. A lot of the things that are there in the 48 things that you need to acquire the Torah are not there when it comes to regular Chachma. But the answer is that Torah does not work like any other Chachma. Atachone la'adam das. HaKadosh Baruch Hu grants you knowledge. Says Rav Aaron Kotler, Mishnah Aaron, says a guy lives next door to the Beis Medrash. He walks in, he sits and he learns for 3 hours. Another guy lives an hour drive away. He drives to the Beis Medrash. I know you're thinking, why isn't he just learning at home? But if you just did last week's Pirkei Avos, then you know it says, Oiseh v'lo helech, so he doesn't have the schar halicha. He's supposed to learn in the Beis Medrash. Yeah. So it takes him an hour to get to the Beis Medrash, so he can only learn for an hour because it's going to take him an hour to get home. So it says of Aaron, they'll both be kona in that amount of time, the same amount of Torah. Torah is a gift. So the Shabbos of Kenyatta Torah tells us like this, that the whole Sfiras HaOmer is set up with one goal in mind. And that is for me to prepare myself as someone who's roy for Torah. We spoke about this last year a little bit. Derech Eretz Kadmol Torah. You need to be a mensch first. First you have to be a mensch before you can become a Torah. Now, in Derech Hashem, the Ramchal writes about all the things you need in order to become a Torah. And then he says, but the Chachamim Megala is a side. And that is that if you learn Torah, it will transform you into a different person. And then he writes, as long as you learn it, not to argue with it, not to make fun of it, you treat it with the same respect as you would any other chachma, then the Torah that you'll take in will have the power of transforming you. But you have to start from the point of view that I'm coming at it like a mensch. Because I can't teach somebody who's just there to make fun. I can't teach somebody who just wants to argue. How do you know? How do you know? Who says? Where'd you get that from? Noach Weinberg, when he used to present his proofs for the existence of God, he would always say, he had a general rule. He says, be a judge and not a lawyer. A lawyer's job is there to argue the case, regardless of whether or not his client is innocent or guilty. If his client wants him to defend him, then he will go in there and defend the worst possible people who committed the most horrific crimes. And the purpose of it is just to argue his defense. Is it right? Is it wrong? Yeah. It says in Parekh Avos, don't be like a lawyer. Be a judge. Look at the evidence and come in. When a person says, why can't you say? Why can't a person argue? He says, of course, a person can argue anything. We used to, people offer as an argument for the existence of the world. It was an article in Scientific America. It says, the odds of even a bacteria forming by pure chance is the same odds as a tornado ripping through a junkyard and assembling by pure chance a 747. Now, so that you appreciate that, there's 1 million parts in the wing of a 747. What are the odds of such a thing happening? It's astronomical. And so when you tell people the odds of even the universe existing, that the antimatter and matter didn't just cancel each other out, is like having 1 trillion white marbles and 1 black marble, and by pure chance reaching in and pulling it out. I stopped giving that argument because people say to me, yeah, sure was lucky. So now what am I going to do? And I always say this, any argument that is predicated upon you being reasonable, if life has taught me anything, it's how incredibly unreasonable people can be. People have a tremendous capacity for unreasonableness. So when a person tells you, wouldn't you grant me that? Won't you, so then people are like, no, who says? Who says? Who says? Some people search for the truth, and some people want to be right. Yeah. And you have to look at a situation and decide what's the most important thing to you. Do I want to be right? Or do I want to find the truth? Yeah. And so in order to be able to have Torah, Derech Eretz coming with Torah, I have to at least be open-minded and reasonable. Now, I remember I was in Discovery once, and at the end of the program, during the question and answer, someone said, we heard everything that you have to say, but what does the other side have to say? One of the rabbis said, didn't you go to college? What did they teach you there? Genesis, Bereshis, Talmud? Or did they teach you, science, skepticism, atheism? They presented things from a Jewish point of view. That's not part of certainly not part of the average curriculum. There was a guy in Asia Torah he had gone to the Yale Divinity School. And he went back and he was in Yale Divinity School. I'm talking about Divinity School, God school. And they were arguing Bible criticism. Bible criticism is, of course, that there are multiple authors who wrote the Bible, So they brought different proofs. And he still had a chavrusa with the rabbi. And so he'd go back to the rabbi, and the rabbi would say, Shkoyach, that's a medrash over here, that's a Gemara over here, it's a Rashi over here. Everybody answers these questions. He's not the first one to think about it. And he kept going back, and he says, Professor, those aren't proofs because you can answer this and answer that. Until finally the professor got frustrated with him and said, we know God didn't write the Torah. Our job is to figure out who did. But in university, we do not accept the concept that God wrote a book. Well, so that's pretty good. So I say, okay, who killed Nicole Brown Simpson? It wasn't OJ. So now who killed him? You might go, well, evidence was it? No, forget about OJ. OJ is not involved here. So who did it? John Wilkes Booth didn't shoot Lincoln. Okay, so who did? No, but he did. No. We're rejecting that. That premise we reject. So you have to be able to come in with a certain open-minded attitude. When I would give classes to secular people, every now and then, I would say, I would turn to people and say, am I making sense? And if they said no, so I would try to address the issue, but most of the time they would say, yeah, what you're saying makes sense. That's all. I just want to present the reason. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to change your life, but tell me if what I'm saying makes sense. So I was giving a class once on marriage. And so obviously in the class, we dealt with relationships outside of marriage and why they were not positive, I remember at one point I turned to a guy, I said, am I making sense? And he goes, unfortunately, yes. So a person has to be open. So the Memches Dvarim is telling me the following. Based on how much I develop my character That's how much I'll be able to be Kona Torah. Otherwise, I'm going to color the Torah with my own preconceived notions. And that's why, as much as possible, we went down to Mitzrayim, which is described as a Kor Barzel. What's a Kor Barzel? It's a smelting pot. You boil out all of the impurities, turn you into pure chomer, perfect raw material to be able to take on a new existence. Free from all previous assumptions. Let everything go. Open your mind. I may have mentioned this, I feel like I mentioned this recently, but very frustrating to play backgammon with somebody that you taught backgammon to. Because they play the same way that you do, because you taught them all the moves. When you play with somebody who learned someplace completely different, you suddenly get a whole completely different game, because they're not coming with your own assumptions. That's why it says, I learned the most from my Talmidim, because my Talmidim aren't coming from this the same way that I am. They're looking at it from a fresh perspective, and they're like, why can't you say this? Look at it in a whole new way. And that's certainly not the way I would have looked at it, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just, it's a different perspective. Now, if I could show you why it's wrong, okay. I want to get you to think. I want you to get you to look at things in a new way. So as we reach the last Shabbos before Shavuos, where is the Shabbos that we finish Pirkei Avos, not Maseches Avos, but Pirkei Avos, which includes the 6th parak called Kinyanei HaTorah, which are the brises that are there to instruct me on the chashivas of Torah. If you want to get Torah, you have to want it. You have to want it. Ma'ahavti sarasecha kol hayom yisichasi. I told this story at one point, but I was teaching in a yeshiva, and I was speaking with another one of the Rebbeim during prep. And there was a guy from LA. He was there for his 2nd year. He was a real macho guy, real cool guy, quite physically fit and talented, and And they got him. They got him the first year. They got him into learning. They made him into a mentor. So he's sitting preparing during the prep time, and he comes over to ask his Rebbe, who I was talking to, a question on the Gemara. And he explained it to him, and he goes, oh, okay, and he goes back. So I went back to what I was saying to him, and he says, wait, watch this. And before he sat down, he did this kind of like little dance before he sat down. And the Rebbe looked at me and said, that's the simcha I wish I had when someone answered a question that I had in the Gemara. That level of excitement. I probably told the story before, but at this point, I'm old enough that I can repeat myself. On that, by the way, Rav Chaim Shmulevitz once gave the same shmooze several weeks in a row in the mirror, and someone finally came over to him and said, "You said this already." He goes, "In Musar, we don't only have to say a chiddush; you have to say a noch daher. You have to hear it again until you integrate the message." So my son told me that he heard from his Rebbe, who heard from his grandfather, who heard from Rabbi Ber, who was there, the first shir that Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik gave in Volozhin. So he comes in, and the Ksais asked the kasha. Now the Ksais wrote very, very minimally. He was so poor he couldn't afford the ink. So he wrote very, very, very brief, almost cryptically, if you can say. Anyway, so Rabbi Chaim asks this question. And he says, sitting around the table were all the Rosh Yeshiva that we still learn today. And he went around and asked everybody to give a teretz, and everybody gave a teretz. And when they were all done, Rabbi Chaim shrugged up all their teretzim. He showed how they were all wrong. And then he showed how Rabbi Baruch Ber, in a few words, knocked off all their answers. Well, as you can imagine, he had everyone's attention. And then he gave an answer. And everybody was thrilled. And then he shrugged it up. Since everybody was devastated. And then he showed you in the K'tzais how the K'tzais thought of his answer too, and how he answered it up. He says, wow, it's unbelievable. So he brings another answer. And this is the way my son tells me that he got the story from his Rebbe, from his Rebbe's Rebbe. He says, it was like a chasana. People were so happy. He says they were dancing on the tables. And then he shrugged it up. He said it was like Tisha B'Av. And then he showed how the K'tzais had anticipated that question as well. And this went on for 3 hours. I don't have that level of enthusiasm. I wish I did. But I can tell you there are times that I have gone to shiurim or Moshe Shapiro where I came out and I wanted to make a bracha. Asher bocha bono mikol ha'amim v'nosan lano es tarasai. Ma'ahavti sarasecha. Because you wanted so much. Ein davar omed levnei ratzon. This is the Shabbos of Kinyanei HaTorah. We have to fill ourselves with a thrill and a desire for Torah. And if we do, then in Mirza Hashem, we will be Zaycha to an Emes HaKapalas of Torah. And that's it for this week. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can leave comments and you can contact me and you can sponsor an episode. Click on the sponsor an episode button. And that's it. I'm Dovid Orlofsky, and this is the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode. And we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah, anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.